Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys about the biggest logical fallacy that's used to create various forms of fad diets or extreme diets. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And that logical fallacy is that if there is a substance in a food that if consumed in excess is bad for you, and that's oftentimes known, we have a long list of things that when consumed in excess are bad for you. And sometimes excess isn't really possible, meaning there's a lot of things out there that it's actually really difficult to get in excess. So it's silly when people say, well, anything's bad for you in excess. Well, that's true, but that doesn't mean that everything is as easy to get in excess as everything else. But the idea that if there's something that can be consumed in excess, that consuming any of it's bad for you, and that consuming zero of it is actually better than moderating it. And the reality is that simply isn't true. When we say that something is bad for you in excess, that usually means if it's not in excess, it's not harmful. But that's used to create various fad diets. And I mean, big ones are perfect examples. Saturated fat, right? Saturated fat. So because saturated fat or refined sugars are bad for you in excess, people then get on these kicks that they can't touch a single drop of it, that they've got to cut it to nearly zero, and they can't eat any food that contains any of these things. Well, the issue you run into is that's going to start eliminating a whole lot of foods. And the truth is, you know what? I'm very much against people consuming excess refined sugars. We know it's a problem. In moderation, they don't harm people. It's about total intake. It is about total intake. And we could talk all day about numbers. I've put out plenty of numbers in the past. It's not hard to find the numbers on, say, fructose intakes and things. For even people who are somewhat sedentary, active people, that number actually goes up. And that's the interesting thing. A lot of these foods that are metabolic in nature, very physically active and athletic people can consume a lot more of them without experiencing any problems from them. It creates a much larger buffer. Whereas in more toxic substances, mercury, things like that, your physical activity is not going to help you there. But when we talk about things like fructose, saturated fat, all these things, really physically active people actually do blunt the negative response to these foods. But people will say, well, you can't have any of these. It's a problem. You can't have it at all because it's bad for you even in very small amounts. Well, that's not reality. That's not reality. But whole diets are created based upon that. Look how many fad diets we have out there these days that are popular now. We had a lot of them in the past, and a lot of them have died off. You guys remember all the different ones, the South Beach diet and all that stuff. That stuff's died away. Now we have paleo, keto, vegan diets. And here's the problem. The latter two come up with the idea that the paleo diet's based on complete nonsense anyways. It's not based upon anything scientific in any remote fashion, and most people can't even define a paleo diet. And if they actually tried to follow a paleo diet, they wouldn't be able to do it, a true Paleolithic diet. But that's a side caveat. The big ones are vegan and keto. And here's the problem we run into with those diets. It's okay for someone to say, look, there seems to be certain benefits or uses for being in a ketogenic state. So that's why I do a ketogenic diet. But what people run into is something quite different. That's one perspective. And yeah, there can be certain medical benefits and other things, or appetite suppression benefits to being in ketosis. But it's still a very extreme diet. What happens though when the people say, well, we know that excess sugars contribute largely to our obesity, heart disease, everything else. We know that's the case, so all carbs are bad. Irrespective of the carb source, carbs have to be cut down. Carbs are the problem. They make a massive generalization about this little area because you know what? It's a known, proven epidemiology fact that societies that eat carbohydrates as by far ultra high carb diets actually have the lowest rates of disease. They have the lowest rates of diabetes, lowest rates of heart disease, lowest rates of obesity. All right, that should dispel that myth, but it doesn't. These people say, oh, all carbs are the enemy. Carbs are the problem. When reality is excess refined sugars are the problem. Okay, excess refined sugars, and they take that to mean all refined sugars, and then they increase that to all carbs. But yeah, the reality is carbohydrates are not the problem. So then people get this whole concept of a whole fad diet that carbs are the problem based upon this little tiny smidget of truth. that this one type of carbohydrate in excess does cause massive problems. Same thing, we go full circle over to the vegans, all right? Take the vegan diets, for example. Normally, it's generally understood most vegans do it for ethical reasons. You know, we could argue about those ethics back and forth all day long. But if someone decides that they are going to do something that's not harming me in any way, not harming anyone I care about in any way, that they feel is better for them ethically, you know what? Let them do it. More power to them. I think every person out there should do what they personally feel is right, as long as what they feel is right isn't going to interfere with the rest of society. That's where we start running into problems. You know what? We could make the argument about that all day. Now, of course, they'll jump up and make other things. Well, you don't care about it. It's like, look, guy, you guys really, if you were to be objective, you guys aren't really any better for animals than the rest of us. I'm just going to be honest there. But totally different debate. Totally different debate. But what they will do, vegans will take one little thing, like we know saturated fat in excess is bad for you. All right, that's not debated anymore. It's pretty well understood. People's blood work pretty well confirms it. We know the data even on saturated fat intake, LDL cholesterol, the effects it has on specific cardiovascular diseases. We have meta-analysis on this stuff. We have causation on this stuff now. This is no longer hypothetical based on Ansel Keys's poorly done research. Okay, not based on that anymore. We have modern data confirming a lot of this. Vegans will jump up and say, well, because saturated fat in excess kills you, they don't hear excess, they hear saturated fat kills you. They completely throw out, disregard that word excess. And here's what they go back to. If something in excess is bad for you, then surely it's better to eat zero of it. Okay, they've made a jump. That's a logical fallacy. The data doesn't prove that. It doesn't confirm that. The data shows the opposite, that there are negative effects when these things are kept in moderation. All right, in other words, zero has no health benefits over moderation. None, zero, zip, zilch. There's no benefit to eating zero. It doesn't help you in any way. But they can't grasp that. No, because in excess it's bad. Any must be bad. Now, they make the full jump there. Well, because saturated fat mostly comes from animal products, which isn't actually true. A lot of nuts and everything are high in saturated fat. A lot of plants are actually high in saturated fat, but that's, again, they don't grasp that. All animal products must be bad because they all have at least trace amounts of it, right? Even that chicken breast, even if you were to eat a diet so low in fat and you only ate chicken breast or turkey breast ultra lean where you skimmed all the extra fat off, you might actually be fat deficient. You could actually develop eventually dietary deficiencies from not getting enough fat by doing that. But in their mind, that's still bad because there's still a tiny little trace drop in there. So all animal products are bad because they all have at least some cholesterol and saturated fat. So the whole thing is bad, all of it. And they create an entire extremist bad diet that's not based on reality, not based on science. And that's exactly what we see happen with these different diets. Logical fallacies. Again, this whole concept that because something in excess is bad for you, that not only must you eat that in zero, but you can't eat anything remotely similar to it. You know, so vegans will jump up and say, okay, since most of the saturated fat cholesterol is coming from animal products, all animal products are bad. They make a massive jump. It's all bad. It's all unhealthy. It all kills you. It has no nutritional value. They actually say stuff like that. Whole fat diet created out of a little bit of scientific truth. A logical fallacy. Same thing, ketogenic diets. A lot of people will go to it because, okay, we know excess refined sugars is bad for you. Okay, all sugars are bad for you. Now all carbohydrates are bad for you. All has to be avoided. All has to be kept at a bare minimum. See the problem? It's this logical fallacy, this jump that people make. This jump that they make is really absurd, really unrealistic, and it allows people to create illogical diets based upon not truth, that aren't based on science, they're not based on reality, they're not based on the research, and jump up and believe that their diet is the pinnacle of truth. And if you don't believe how absurd it is, take both of those diets. They're opposite incompatible extremes. One diet is basically all animal products, other diet's all plant products. Both believe their diet is the ultimate fat loss, ultimate health, ultimate longevity diet, when they're completely polar opposites. And they both legitimately believe that their diet's based upon logic, science, and reason. when neither one actually is. Again, logical fallacies, when you start accepting absurd premises, you will arrive at absurd conclusions. Basic logic here, guys. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.